Hey, it's Barb with Inspire Me 360, and I want to talk in this video about a couple questions in the comments that were related to birth and death cycles, reincarnation, the understanding of how this works. Now, again, I'm only going to teach it the way that I have been given the information, and remember, again, this is only a small fraction, like a tiny grain of sand of consciousness. So I will never teach that anything that I say is absolute truth. And even, when we look at the concept of absolute truth or absolution, there is always expansion. So when we think of Earth and our collective consciousness, this is one very narrow band of the possibilities of creation that exist in this universe, and of course when we look at other universes that may exist as well, or do exist as well. So the multiplicity of infinite possibilities for how creation out-manifests are, like I said, they're infinite. I don't want to get into that, but essentially what I'm trying to say with this message is that being judgmental or having a very, very rigid way of thinking, it's not wrong or incorrect, it just is limiting. And anytime you are limiting your learning, you're limiting your evolution and your expansion. So another way to look at this historically, because I always like to use examples, for many, many years, we, as a collective, it was taught that Earth was flat and that you would fall off the edge. And if you challenged that, you'd be seen as crazy or a heretic or, nonsensical, okay? And there would be, huge consequences. Again, the consequences being a little bit ridiculous because in the end, we learned the Earth was round. And, there was also points in history where, it was taught and the collective consciousness their belief was that the Earth was the center of the universe and that all of the celestial bodies orbited around the Earth. And we now know that's incorrect. So it is, again, when I'm teaching these things and when or if there is some sort of dogmatic trigger within your consciousness, a judgment or something that moves you into a thought process of attack or again, judgment, it's important to look at that and equate whatever that thought is and question it through the lens of unconditional love. Because anytime that we think that we as a being are in the position to judge another due to what they are experiencing, expressing, whatever it is, and that it's our right to hurt another, to judge another, to take another life, well, that absolutely is not in accordance with the energy of divine or unconditional love. The way that it has been taught to me is that we are allowed through the mechanism of free will, knowing that we are childlike. That teaching means that our consciousness is childlike. It is in its stages of infancy in terms of its universal understanding, okay? So when we see and experience terms like children of God or children of the divine, I believe the teaching is really trying to express that our consciousness is in its infancy in terms of understanding the breadth and expansion and evolution of higher realms of consciousness, okay? And of course, we would relate these higher realms of consciousness with that which is divine. When we think of divinity, I also like to correlate it to that which creates in or on a large scale. So in the higher realms, at higher levels of consciousness, the things that we create or the things that consciousness can create are much larger, okay? Here on Earth, again, in our infancy, we can create things. We can create structures. We can create, beautiful works of art. But again, keep in mind that our creation abilities are, they're kind of, I don't want to say childlike, but in a way, okay? And as we understand universal principles of creation more acutely, we expand our minds, into, different realms of science. And we've seen the ability, as we move into these different layers of creation, how we can technically create things like an atomic bomb, that have a very far-reaching effect. Now, utilizing this understanding of the layers of creation for that which is destructive is not, again, in alignment with the love and the light energy. But nonetheless, this is what we're doing here on planet Earth. We are learning through all that is, through 3D material aspects, and then, again, moving our consciousness into the different layers of reality through the subatomic, through the quantum. All of these aspects are part of our learning process. So back to the original question, okay, about reincarnation, and giving a few examples of what that is and why it exists, and why, again, what I've been taught is that very much so reincarnation does happen. So here's the framework for me expressing this view. If we think of eternal life, if we think of the concept of existing eternally, that is a very expansive state. That is, we've been taught through linear thinking that things have a beginning and an end. But to think of the concept of, well, what happened before that beginning and what happened before that beginning? It's important to ask these questions, because as we ask the questions through the mechanism or learning tool of the mind, of the three-dimensional mind, we realize that it does not compute. It just doesn't make sense. So as we realize that, then we would ask ourselves the question, okay, then what does make sense? If we truly believe that we are an energy, a soul, a spirit, then we must accept the fact that that energy, soul, or spirit exists beyond this lifetime. Then we would naturally ask the question, if it exists beyond this lifetime, what is the purpose, and what does the soul, spirit, or energy do after this particular lifetime? And why would we have a lifetime that would encompass a body in the first place? So here's some answers to those questions. So the reason that we would have a body that a soul would take up as residence, this would become the house that we live in for this particular aspect of time, space, reality. It would be experiential. So to experience in a tactile, sensory way what it is to exist. It would be experiential in terms of experiencing what it is. So what love is, what that contrast to what love is may feel like. Why would it do that? It would do that to have a much more deeply calibrated understanding of itself. And in the division of what it is, through that mechanism of dissemination into other bodies, it can see the reflection of itself. And again, the purpose of that, so when we are questioning what is the purpose of understanding the self, it's a journey. It is a story. It's the reason or the purpose is the story and the journey itself. I mean, why do you go to watch a movie? It's an experience. It's It takes you places. It makes you feel things. It's experiential. So I think moving away from the concept that there is a singular purpose, I think is fundamental in understanding the why behind what we see and experience. I have found throughout my existence that there is never one singular why. And it's always a tapestry of exciting reasons that propel the outward expansion of experience. So then back to the concept of reincarnation. So if energy cannot be created or destroyed, energy is moving, in a sense, between the physical and the non-physical, particle and wave. This is a continual cycle that is both automatic and directed. Automatic because it has its subconscious or its knee-jerk reaction patterning that it's causation, and directed because consciousness is aware of itself. It is self-aware. So therefore it has its desire to experience through this expansion, this evolutionary process. Now, when we think of motivation, there is a deep motivation for new experiences, to experience that which has not been done before. It's the reason that we go to the moon. It's the reason why we look at the stars and wonder. One of the purest, most beautiful, energetic aspects of consciousness is wonder, bewilderment, excitement, adventure, not knowing, that which is mysterious. And that is probably one of the most concrete reasons for evolution, the why behind it, that excitement, that energy of vibration. When we experience the unknown, we vibrate at a different frequency. There is an element of energy that is created from that not knowing, from that excitement experience. And as the mystery deepens, the excitement grows, that energy essentially vibrates at a higher and higher frequency. So then that can help to explain, again, why we also forget. So in the incarnation process, in the reincarnation process, we will decide to experience such a vast variety of life blueprints because, again, we learn through those experiences. Just as, any type of school lesson, teaching curriculum, experiential learning is some of the deepest learning, and experiential learning through contrast. So that's why the shadow also plays a role in this, because when we understand that negative aspect of consciousness, the breadth of consciousness, we attune ourselves more readily to a higher plane or a higher attainment of existence in terms of our creational abilities or what we choose to create. Remember that creation is directed through thought forms, through what we see in the landscape of the mind. And it's all a calibration. It's a thought calibration, which again goes back into frequency, energy. All of it is linked together, or inexplicably, you can't separate one aspect from the other. It's just that we experience on this three-dimensional plane, so we don't perceive the lower, and I don't want to mean lower in terms of the descent or negative thought forms. But when we are in our conscious material-based mind, we don't drop into the atomic, subatomic, quantum levels very readily. However, when we're in that flow state or a meditative state, or if you're in sort of a religious trance, now religious, wrong term here, but if we can pull from religious teachings, that sort of trance-like state, or in historical times, we would look at it as somebody that is an oracle, where they can drop into a different frequency and pull out information or pull out understandings that are beyond what the eyes, ears, tangible senses can understand. We can also call this channeling. Now, again, I have been able to do this my entire life, and that's how I know. It's not, and if you haven't ever had an experience like this, it wouldn't make sense to you. And if you have, then you'd absolutely understand what I'm talking about. It's just a knowing. It's a different state than the state I am in right now, where I'm talking in front of this camera. I am not aware of my surroundings. I'm not, my consciousness is not anchored into the three-dimensional aspects of Earth. It's somewhere, and I don't want to say it's somewhere completely else, because it's not a physical place. So it doesn't really matter where you are in the physical when you are in a trance-like state, or when you've moved your consciousness outward, and it's an expansion. It actually feels like that. So the way you would feel it is like sort of when you're blowing up a balloon. You actually feel yourself getting larger, and the self that you identify with within a body, the personality, it no longer exists, and it's irrelevant. So also one of the questions was about near-death experiences and how that relates. And I haven't personally ever had a near-death experience. I have had a great-grandmother and a grandmother who both went through a near-death experience where they floated above their bodies. They could actually see themselves, see the body, and a lot of really interesting things happened in these near-death experiences that the doctors, were able to, verify that there's no way that them being patients could have seen what was on the operating table, could have seen outside of the hospital room, what was going on outside the hospital. One of the interesting things was there was something on the roof that my grandma saw that, they were able to verify. So just different things like this that were very strange. And then again, a super peaceful feeling, being not in a body. And the other thing that my grandma told me about was that she looked down at her body and thought, what a creepy looking thing that is. Like almost that the body looked alien, that it's scraggly little arms, and it just looked like something she didn't want to get back into, and that it was almost like a mechanical kind of apparatus that, yes, she could go back in there, but she didn't really know if she wanted to, and that the beautiful energy of the light that was enveloping her consciousness was just so, it felt like home. It was so beautiful. And also she expressed to me that, both of my grandmas, because again, the stories were not exactly the same, but similar. So my grandmother that was, my actual grandmother and not my great grandmother, she explained it as, she saw a white light that was in the distance, but she didn't actually move into the white light. Now, my great-grandmother, she actually got up into the white light. So she went beyond, and she saw a tunnel. And the tunnel was essentially, there was no, the way she explained it to me, there was no blackness that she experienced. Now, I know in a lot of near-death experiences, because I've researched them from a young age, because I was so interested in my grandmother's stories, that there are some people that go through, a dark tunnel before they reach the light. My great-grandmother never saw a dark tunnel. It was only this white light tunnel that I've understood it was that essentially that which is a black hole is sort of that tunnel that sucks all of the material aspects of this plane into it. And, when that light energy is expelled out of the black hole, that's essentially that white tunnel that we're moving into that transports us into other realms. And that's not the only way we can enter the light. There's also things like the sun. It wouldn't make sense from understanding it from material reality, because of course you wouldn't want to enter into the sun. If you were in a body, you would get burnt up. So that would not be a wise thing for a body to do. But you have to remember, in spirit form, thermal energy, high vibrational energy, it doesn't matter. You don't have a body. So if you are to enter the information that is contained within the sun, because again, at higher frequencies, the amount of information that is held within that realm of existence there's more to it. There's more to understand. There's more to learn. And if you don't have a body, it's not a big concern whether, what the temperature is and all of these little things that obviously, if we're looking at it through the spectrum or through the understanding of having a body, would be a concern. So that's also why in all of the understanding that I've made through this incarnation and all of the lessons that I've been able to, break down through my conscious mind, I don't have a fear of death, because I understand, okay, the body, it's a nice apparatus to learn through. I'm not particularly attached to it. It's great to have a body. It is nice to, I'm grateful for it. I certainly, and I've talked about, darker thought forms on this channel before, people that have, if they think about things like suicide, some of those darker things, I have no desire to, in that way, even though I've had difficult times in my life. But the reason I bring this up is because I don't want to say that not having a body should trigger thoughts of, okay, so I should get rid of this body. That's not what Spirit is teaching. That's not a divine teaching. And there are a lot of cults that will take a piece of information and then basically twist it around and get it really confused and do some really odd things. And so again, I always want to tether my teachings to, no, think of these things, understand them, play with them, figure out for yourself what fits for you in terms of logic. Take things like science, take philosophical teachings, and see and play with it in your own life. If you see that wonderful things happen for you because you're changing the frequency of your thoughts and your life becomes more beautiful due to making those adjustments, then that is a spiritual confirmation that is presenting itself and manifesting itself in your material world to show you you're on the right track. If you're doing something that, again, may not be in line with a high vibrational or righteous way of being, then that will also be quite evident. And an example that I have of that is that if through the lens of understanding that you have, you are perhaps judging others and being hurtful to others and essentially dividing yourself from others because of a dogmatic teaching, then that would be opposite of ascension. That would be the opposite of resurrecting your consciousness into unity with love and light. And that's basically it. Now, how to know if reincarnation is a thing or if it's not a thing, and if you only get one lifetime, well, that's complex. I mean, nobody knows. Nobody can tell you for sure, and that's also purposeful. If we knew definitively 100% that after this particular lifetime that we would carry on, that there would be another realm of existence, call it heaven, call it hell, call it whatever you want, that we would go to another planet, that we would definitely have the energy of our consciousness and what we are could be projected into, say, another animal form or another life experience on another planet, whatever have you, well, we might not try so hard here. And actually we wouldn't. I mean, that's a definitive. If you knew that you essentially had an ace in the hole or a get out of jail free card in your back pocket at all times, the system wouldn't function as it does. And that is why we have this veil of forgetting. This is why we have layers of our consciousness, and that things are given to us when they're needed. We remember when it's time to remember, and we forget for a reason. We forget so that we can create another expanded view of the self. And I don't know if that brings you any peace, but it certainly does, for me, become very formidable. And because I've had to deal with my own mortality in this lifetime, having to specifically lay there day after day and accept the fact that I would not have this body, and also look at both aspects of that. So what is absolute nothingness, and what would absolute expansion look like? What would darkness be if all the lights were just off and there was no neurological activity, no thoughts? How would that look? And for the life of me, I couldn't conceive it. And it just didn't seem to be correct with all we understand about energy. Now, there's another layer to this that I won't get into. I probably will never get into in terms of these videos, because it's complex and it is maybe a little bit too controversial, but they were experiences that I had when I was a child. And again, I likely will never talk about it on this channel, but they were so foundational to my learning experience and to what I experienced, and just, I don't know, it's something, again, that I have grappled with my entire life, of whether I share these things or not. And I haven't hit a point where I feel that there's any purpose in sharing them at this point in time. So I will just continue forward, giving as much information as I can that I feel calibrates to what human beings can understand and stay in a peaceful state about. Okay, I'm going to sign off on this video. It was a bit of an interesting one, but I did want to take time to answer some of the questions, and I hope you all have an incredible weekend.